Okay, so this was a bit of an interesting interaction that I had on Discord. Something that had been going on for quite a while now, and this one in particular just added to that and made me want to just make a video talking about it. This interaction was me with another member of the Minecraft Dungeons Discord, and pretty helpful member, likes to give enchantment and gear advice, things like that. But over time there's been a sort of misplacement of understanding where a lot of the information and things that are common knowledge now originated from, leading to a sort of undermining of my credibility in regards to like enchantment advice and stuff, when a lot of the roles are, if not ones that I dictated, at least ones that I had originated for myself without copying anything or anyone like that. But yeah, the interaction started with someone here asking like what would be a god role for Master Katana, and they had given their answer here, and me, because I like making things like this, I have shared a lot of information. I liked to make it in image form because the bot likes to delete a lot of stuff, and I just don't like repeating myself. I gave my information for Master's Katana because I finished this actually, I think, yesterday, and for this I went really deep into this info here. Like, I have my own meter, or say baseline, for how I gauge the star level for different stats. Like 3 million is the top for 5 stars, and 1.3 something million was the bottom, which would be a Coral Blade for a half star, and then incrementally going up half star each time from that. Speed was every 1.5 hits per second goes up half a star, and then reach was between, I believe, like 1.9 blocks at half a star to 7 blocks at 5 stars. Could have been 2.6 blocks, I can't remember exactly. And then the area was just a 360-degree spin for the attacks being 5 stars, and then like 30 degrees being half a star. And for that I kind of just eyeballed it. But it also went into the damage per hit for the combo, what the combo looks like basically, what the hits per second of the weapon is with a mushroom and armor with 125% attack, or 25% more attack speed. So basically what you would get at maximum base value. Then that base DPS without any attack speed buffs, and then the potential DPS for it. And then I would go into some information about it. For instance, Master's Katana actually has really high stagger and or stun value to its hits without stunning on it, because Apocalypse plus 25 enemies have a lot of stagger resistance, and like 2 or 3 hits from this can actually stagger them. And originally I thought it was because of Void Strike, but it was not doing that for other weapons, not like this. The only other weapon that I had that happen with was Encrusted Anchor. Anyway, this also went into finding out how much DPS Void Strike adds on average at 125% attack speed, or more attack speed. And that is a process to figure out, because if you're hitting consistently with the same attack speed, Void Strike still will not give the same damage boost for the same hit constantly. In fact, there are 3 values that it can fluctuate between. For instance, on one weapon I was getting 820,134 damage for the middle value, 899,502 for the top value, and 740,766 for the bottom value. And if I remember correctly, if you average those 3 out, it does come out to that middle one, but it's still very random which ones pop up, and they can be quite a bit of a percentage off from each other, especially if you look at the bottom one and the top one. Some are even further apart, so it was really hard to average that out. So I did my best though to get as accurate as I could for that. But yeah, I provided that information. The response that I got was, I like how Shin, that being me, stole their advanced god rolls idea. Now, when it comes to god rolls for a weapon, like I said, those were things that I determined myself. Whether or not others thought of some of them themselves as well is another thing, but it's something that I never copied off of. fact, like when Echoing Void came out and I saw that Unchanting was a melee enchant, and then I saw how Void Strike worked, which was day one, I knew right there that those two were going to be meta. But I responded saying, I have never used anyone's info as my own, which is true. I determined Void Strike and Unchanting were meta when I learned of them. But they said I'm talking about how basically right after they made their version of the Fighter's Bindings enchant chart, that went more in depth with stuff like hits per second, DPS, more mentions of the uses of the enchants, the base damage of them, so you make charts of your own that include the uses of the enchants, hit per second, DPS, and so on. Also, I determined the same about those enchants too. I think everyone did. Now, in terms of actually making charts, this was not something I was copying off of this person. For charts, this was back in January. I can even show the properties of this here. See, I made this chart in January here. This was back either before Apocalypse Plus or just with power 113 or 114 weapons. This here was a complete DPS chart of the weapons at that point, and this isn't just the percentage, this is going like the actual numbers. I determined the DPS of the weapons first and then the addition of them. And this is without attack speed boosts, this was just the base DPS with these enchants. This being like critical hit being 40%, back then I believe committed was 50%, which is wrong. Enigma Resonator being 50%, things like that. Swirling being 80% more, Shockwave being 60%, but them not multiplying each other like Crit and Enigma Resonator would. But yeah, this was back in January, and then after that, this is actually the final version, so this was not even the earliest version of the chart. This one I had made in May, but it was a little bit earlier. I spent 2 weeks working on this. This was a huge behemoth of a chart here. This had, this was after Flames of the Nether came out, including all of those weapons with a ton of different enchant combinations, up to over 400 entries of me calculating all of the different DPS, knowing the base DPS, even going with things like a Freezing Foil, which has really low DPS, and no DPS enchants on this here. I wasn't going fully with damage, I was going with from my understanding of how the enchants worked, what would be good enchantments to have on these weapons. So it's not like I don't know how enchantments work, not like, you know, I don't give good enchantment advice, because I know fully how they affect things, and this was why I made all of this. So basically, aside from just being a DPS chart, this is also a weapon god rolls chart, or even just like rolls that you could use for the weapons. So this was a chart that I made a long time ago. Now, in terms of talking about like hits per second, DPS, things like that, in order for me to make those charts way back in January and stuff, I had to know the hits per second of the weapon, because I had to calculate that in with the damage per hits of the weapon, and then knowing the DPS of the enchantments and how they increase the weapon's damage. Like, that was stuff that I already knew. It was not something that I took from that. In fact, it was quite the opposite, actually, but I'll get into that then. But, for instance, I went on saying, like, for instance, critical hit, when I first joined the group, was believed to be a 60% boost by a lot of people, and this is because crit's a 3 times damage multiplier, and it has a 1 in 5 chance to trigger, so people were adding 3 extra hits to those 5, getting 8, which 3 is 60% of 5, but they were making the mistake. If you land 5 hits and one of them's a crit, that's 2 extra hits of damage, because you're dealing 4 hits of damage, and then that 5th one is worth 3, so it's 4 plus 3, so it's a 40% boost. That was something that I had to explain and give the formula for. Not something that, like I said, not everyone needed that, like some did already know this, but it was something that was introduced. On top of that, Sharpness and Crit were favored over Committed for a long time, even by me, until I actually looked at the enchantment. Now, the way that it's worded, I believed originally that if a mob didn't have full health, they took randomly between 0% to 100% more damage just on all your hits, so I averaged that out to 50% more, which that's not how it works. Whatever percentage of health a mob's missing, that's how much more percentage your hit does. Calculating that, well, for one thing, you would know it never comes out to 50% more DPS, because you have to land a 100% hit, which the mob would already be dead by then. But when I was running the numbers, going through like all of the starting percentages that I could do, it came out to, actually some hits were only doing 26% more damage and effectively not giving you more reduced hits than sharpness. They were both about the same. But it more so averaged to 40% to 45% more DPS. Also, because Void Strike has such a big fluctuation in damage, when I was testing it with Cowardice and Renegade Armor's Weapon Damage Boost Aura, which are both flat modifiers, I was getting, I guess, low rolls, and I thought that because of that, I thought I would be hitting higher, but it wasn't. So it looked like it was behaving like a flat modifier, so I had said that. So when I said others falsely repeating that Void Strike was a flat modifier because I had said so by mistake, or how some buffs are indeed flat, things like that, was like stuff that I said that people just copied. And then the response I got was, no, I still don't know how you made the mistake that mistake with Void Strike. You know, you just combine it with Sharpness or 2, and it's obvious it's not flat or Strength Potion. The interesting thing about that comment, though, is because if I go forward to where someone was asking about if Void Strike boosts Cowardice, because Cowardice is a flat buff, something that I had said, because people did not know that, this person had said that they work with each other, though both are additive. So they will do more DPS, but they will not multiply each other. This being the person who just said that they didn't know how I didn't know that it was multiplicative. Them saying here that it's not multiplicative because I said that it wasn't. And this was day 1 when Void Strike came out. I was testing it, and I had said that and everyone clung to that. Until I did more testing and I corrected that. I was the first one saying any of this stuff here. Or for instance, with this katana guide from them, this here, Committed being a 50% DPS boost, which is false. If anyone does the testing for themselves, they would know that Committed is not a 50% DPS boost. Or Pain Cycle, for instance, a 66.67% DPS boost. This was something I had first said, and I said it right in front of them in the group, because Pain Cycle, you do 5 hits to stack up your pain stacks. The 6th hit then will do 5 times damage. So, essentially, when you land your 6th hit, well, let's say you're landing 5 hits, and then your 6th hit does 5 more hits. That is 10 hits that you're landing in 6 attacks, which is a 2/3 increase. Well, roughly 2/3, like I said, 66.67%. But yeah, you were landing 6 attacks, getting 10 hits worth for it, and that's where I came up with that number there. And it also says, saying that it is additive. This information here also was information found by me. It was believed for a while that all of the damage buffs were multipliers, because everyone was talking about it like that, like the insane damage that you could do with Pain Cycle. Until I had tried to one-shot Mushroom Monstrosity, my buffs being Full Metal Armor's 30% damage boost, I had Cowardice for 40% more, I had Reckless for 80% more, I had Pain Cycle active, I had Strength Potion active, I had Shadow Brew, I was using an Encrusted Anchor, and then I triggered Crit, and I used a Gong all at the same time. And in my calculations it should have done, I can't remember, it was either 2.5 billion or 4.5 billion. And I only did 280,202,944. Now I know it's like, what, only that much? That's insane damage. But it just wasn't as high as it should have been. And I was showing that to my girlfriend when I was like, look at this. And I was like, that's not as much damage as it should be. And I was going through the numbers trying to figure out why it wasn't working like we believed it should. And though she's not a big expert on the game or big with numbers, she said to me that, you know, I'm not applying them all correctly. They don't all multiply like that. And it was obvious about that, but her saying that made me really realize, like, yeah, I gotta look into this more. It wasn't enough to just know that. I had to find out what enchantments were not multiplying, which was not easy because if you have a non-multiplying enchant combined with a multiplying one, they will both appear to multiply because the multiplying one will multiply the non-one. So I had to try every single different enchantment combination just to isolate which ones were multipliers and which ones were modifiers, and I had to figure out then how much of a modifier they were. Like, for instance, I was doing punches with my bare fist, doing 1 damage. Strength Potion then was giving me 2 damage, and then Strength Potion and Shadow Brew were giving me 9 damage, and I was like, so is Shadow Brew then like a 4.5 times multiplier? What's actually happening is Strength Potion increases your base damage by 100%, so it'll double that, and Shadow Brew increases your base damage by 700%, so it'll multiply that by 8, but they do not interact with each other. So the Strength Potion was giving me 1 more damage, and the Shadow Brew was giving me 7 more damage, and they were combining for 9. The same thing was for Weapon Damage Boost Aura, and Cowardice, Reckless, Artifact Synergy, Pain Cycle as well. These were all things that I tested out and I found out, and I shared that information because that was really big to know, like really important. But on top of that though, if I just look up this phrase here, you will get this here, you know, saying, by using the power of copying Shin's work, I have found out that Claymores do slightly more DPS. It's like, I like how all of the data points used there are just basically copied from Shin, I copy everything from Shin. What do you mean? Because I copy percentages from Shin, because it's been fact-checked to see which is, yeah, I just copy Shin. Like, all of that, and like, not like I mind that exactly, except when charts are being made with that information saying made by this person, and people are believing that they came up with those numbers, like Fighter's Bindings getting an 80% DPS increase from Shockwave and Swirling. For instance, where would I find it exactly? It might be here. I know I have one of these here about it. Let's try this here. Yeah, here. This is damage chance radiance adds no. But it was saying basically Swirling adds 80% DPS to Fighter's Bindings, Shockwave adds 60%, Committed adds 50%, which, again, like I said, is wrong. Anyone who... This is how I can tell if someone did the research themselves or not, because if they did, and because I was misunderstanding how it worked, I didn't actually like crunch the numbers, but if anyone did their own research, they would know instead of just copying me. Someone else then commented on this saying DPS Master is Shin, so that was probably found out by him, and yeah, that was indeed what happened. But this is not just for things like the DPS, stuff like that. For instance, the Common God roll for Feral Soul Crossbow is Gravity, Wild Rage, Tempo Theft, and Anima Conduit. Now, the first person who mentioned that god roll was me, and I wasn't saying that it was a god roll, I was saying that was the roll that I was going for on my Feral Soul Crossbow. It is used for melee, but it's not the most efficient for melee in that sense. Like, Gravity's okay, but playing melee a lot, you don't really need Gravity for melee, and Imploding Crossbow does that better. But the reason why I wanted, well, for instance, for starters, my original ranged weapon was a Void Collar, which is now considered meta again, but it was something that I was using way back before it got the ability to use Looting or Soul Siphon. It was because my favorite builds were soul builds, so I used a Void Collar with Wild Rage, Enigma Resonator, and I forget what the other enchantment was on it. Oh yeah, Anima Conduit, I'm stupid. But the reason I liked it was because for my soul build I liked Lightning Rod, and on PlayStation 4 you can't choose your target, it kind of highlights for you, so I would target the enemy with Lightning Rod and I would shoot them with the Void Collar because it has gravity built in to pull enemies into it, and then they would all get struck by that lightning. And when I found Feral Soul Crossbow, I kind of just modeled it after that. It has Enigma Resonator built in, so I just then gave it Wild Rage, Gravity, and Anima Conduit to copy it. But then for Gilded, when I was running Apocalypse plus 25 with my Wither Armor, well, let me say, like, the reason why this god roll is repeated by a certain other individual here was saying about dealing with Redstone Golems with a soul build. This person is not a big soul build user. That was something that I had said was my problem because I was running my soul build on Obsidian Pinnacle and fighting tons of Redstone Golems one after another. My strategy is usually to go up to a Redstone Golem and start wailing on them with melee as they're laying their mines, and then shoot them with my imploding crossbow that has tempo theft, so I could run away when they start getting up to try to smack me, and then I just outpace them until they want to lay mines again, rinse and repeat. For a soul build, I would keep my distance and blast it with lightning rod and a corrupted beacon, but because I had not been running any speed on my soul build because I have 3 soul artifacts, I had to start running much earlier because it outran me. And I really wanted tempo theft on my Wild Rage, Gravity, Anima Conduit, Feral Soul Crossbow just for that reason. But that was why I was saying that was my god roll. But that was considered the god roll, but it was because that was something that I had originally said. Same thing for a lot of rolls for weapons, like because originally I had actually thought that Shockwave and Swirling were based on the weapon's original damage, because people don't always look at the numbers for stuff right away or the damage they're dealing, and I didn't think it would be good on Fighters' Bindings because of the weak base damage, but when I did actually look at it, then I was like, wow, this is a lot more DPS. But ever since then, like, I'd figured out that Thundering was 45% more DPS on Fighters' Bindings, and that with Lightning Focus, it's not actually 79%, it's 78.74%, but they said 78.8 or 9% because that's what I originally said, but it was all stuff that I had introduced first. And now I just brought out, like, how damage reduction works with each other, things that don't work the way that they should, and exactly how different they work, or the exact percentage chance you have to stun lock with weapons with stunning. I'm assuming to see like that information circulated, and forgotten like who found out that kind of information, but just stuff like that. But the thing with certain enchants being additive and others being multiplicative, that was, like I said, that one bothers me a bit more because that was something that my girlfriend actually helped me find out. So when I see like credit being taken from others who don't do that work, then yeah, it does bother me a bit more personally, I would say, I guess. But mainly, like I said, a lot of this information exists because I went and I found it out. And it's something that you could do with a calculator, sure, but it does depend on how well you know how to figure out the formula, like for multiple instances of damage reduction or stacking probabilities, things like that. For instance, I know how to find out, actually know the DPS itself, but you've got Artifact Synergy, which increases the damage of your next hit by 80%. It is not multiplicative, but it won't matter for this. You've got an Encrusted Anchor that does 2,147,149 damage per hit. It hits about it hits 56 times per minute, which I actually kind of guessed at that. Well, I didn't guess that one I knew, but with Artifact Canceling, I had guessed that it would hit about 60 times a minute, and it does hit exactly 60 times a minute. But if you have one cooldown enchantment on your armor and you're using Gong of Weakening, Ironhide Amulet, and Deathcap Mushroom, how much extra DPS would Artifact Synergy add to an Encrusted Anchor if you're constantly attacking with all of that information? You know, having 125% more attack speed, having cooldown on like Spider Armor, having Gong, Mushroom, and Ironhide Amulet with 2,147,149 damage per hit, and then calculating that along with Renegade Armor's damage boost, which is only additive, and then calculating it with Cowardice too. Like, that's something that you could do with a calculator, but it's not something that is so easy to do with just a calculator if you don't know how to plug those numbers in. Figuring stuff out like that. Like, when I made that DPS list, it wasn't just, well, it was wrong. Like I said, I was multiplying things that were additive or not multiplying things correctly. Like I said, committed should not be a 50% boost. But, like, figuring out how to combine additive and multiplicative boosts together, how to do that, or how to combine DPS enchants that are completely separate, like Shockwave and Swirling, that's its own separate DPS. What you could do is critical hits 40% more DPS on Fighters' Bindings, and Shockwave and Swirling combined for 140% more DPS. So to get the rough estimate, you could just add those together, so you would get 180% more DPS, give or take, which is affected by attack speed, which is nice. But some DPS is not affected by attack speed so much, like the poison of Anchor or Vine Whip, or just Poison Cloud and Fire Aspect in general, those are not affected by attack speed, so you have to take that into account. Little things like that that you can easily miss. It's a really long and apparently really thankless process to figure that stuff out. But that also included things like, back when I joined the server as well, people hated gravity on melee. They believed it was as bad as gravity pulse, because, you know, you're pulling mobs towards you, why would you want that? And this was really widespread. It got more accepted though. I wasn't as alone as I was with Wild Rage, but it was really hard defending it. Well, not really hard exactly, but had a lot of defending to do. I was saying, you know, on Apocalypse plus 20, you're not really going to be able to keep mobs away from you anyway. If you're attacking mobs in front of you, you can have enemies hitting you from behind, which you don't want. Gravity can help pull enemies from that into your hits, so that they're not hitting you for free, and it also helps group mobs together so you're killing more at a time. But also, with weapons that have certain reach, you can actually hold mobs at the tip of your weapon's reach if they have pushback, and it can actually keep them from being able to hit you at all. Like, Fighter's Bindings can do this. To an extent, you can do this with Battle Staves, and you can do that with even Sickles. You can definitely do it with Rapiers, and especially with Glaives and Spears. Like, stuff that I'd already known to begin with. And that was repeated and kind of forgotten where that came from. It was even kind of thrown back at me in the sense, like I was trying to say, you know, you could use E-Spear with Void Strike, Enchanting, Guarding Strike, and Leeching, but it was, my sanity was being questioned by said user for not using gravity on it, but like a spear does still have a decent, like, it's kind of narrow, but you still can hit things directly in front of you. They don't have to be very far away, and if you have Guarding Strike, you can afford to take hits, so it doesn't matter. And so I was like, you could use either gravity so you don't take hits, or you could use Guarding Strike so you can take reduced hits, so it doesn't matter. And for that, I wouldn't want to run really Void Strike, Gravity, Guarding Strike, and Leeching to double down on that, because if I'm using Gravity, I'm not really taking hits anyway. You can even get away without using Ironhide Amulet with that. So I just didn't see a need to use Guarding Strike with that. But with Guarding Strike, I would want as much damage as I could get to make sure I was getting that kill every 4 seconds. But it was interpreted instead that, you know, these weapons use gravity really well to being interpreted as these weapons are not that good without gravity, which that was something I never said. I even used a Freezing Foil for a while that had Crit, Committed, Radiance, and Exploding, and it did just fine in Ancient Hunts. Another one being also Wild Rage. For a while, I was actually alone on that one. I was seen as really crazy. People were really questioning everything about me from liking Wild Rage, but my reason was because from playing many other games, realized that dividing enemy aggro is really strong because you don't have as many enemies hitting you. So when you shoot an enemy with Wild Rage and they get enraged, they will not only not attack you, and not only hurt other enemies too, even though it's a little bit, they can also body block those enemies that are trying to get you from getting to you, and it's really nice then. If you enrage, say, a Ravager, and it turns around for even a second to hit an enemy behind it, you get free hits on its backside until, well, basically it's dead, because even if you're hitting it, it will not stop attacking that other enemy until it's dead, so it's not so much that you use Wild Rage to kill other enemies, so much as you use Wild Rage to have them block other enemies, and so that the enemy that you enrage is not hitting you, so you get free hits on it. But also it's really nice because it turns enchantments against other enemies. The biggest one, and this is an argument that's been repeated from me because this was something I pointed out first from realizing it, that if you enrage an enemy, it cannot heal other enemies with heals allies, and it cannot be healed by heals allies. So if there's a huge group of heals allies mobs that are just circle healing each other, if you enrage 1 or 2 of them, you can kill those mobs much easier. But also if you shoot a creeper with it, and I have many video examples of this that I didn't upload, but you shoot a creeper with it and it gets enraged, that creeper is basically dead. It explodes on the nearest enemy. That's why it's such a good enchant. And seeing some people saying like, yeah, I used to like really rag on it till Shin convinced me to try it out, and it's amazing. But I'm constantly seeing, you know, this information repeated, which like I said isn't bad, but the credit for that stuff being taken, it being shared kind of almost like plagiarized, and it's not like it's impossible to figure this stuff out yourself, at least for DPS and stuff. That's a lot easier. You don't need to think outside the box as much. Well, that's not true. For some formulas I had to think outside the box, but then I provided those formulas so others could plug those numbers into the calculator for themselves. but it's just a general like forgetting where that came from. So situations like this happen where, you know, I'm making these charts here using my own information, stuff that I figured out myself, stuff that I spread and shared that was being then circulated after that, and being called out for copying when, like I said, the stark opposite was happening. And it's not just with that. I've seen many of my arguments towards other things being pretty much repeated verbatim. But yeah, I just wanted to just kind of get that off my chest because, yeah, this has been happening for quite a little while, but you can see from those examples there, it's not like, because I could have taken screenshots of those things, but it's so easy to like change stuff with pictures. But like, if you're seeing information like that, it is possible that someone could have figured that out for themselves, but I have not copied a single person when it came to this. I did a lot of work to figure out the DPS for weapons. In fact, if I go through and look for where I was doing the math for that, I have this document here which is full of my notes for how I figure out the DPS. You've got Katana, Master's Katana, Dark Katana here. I was doing the combo damage. You get 3 hits. This was the damage here. I landed 30.8 hits with my Ironhide Amulet, which was at the time 21.2 seconds, so we divided it by that. Figuring out how much Pain Cycle adds to that as well, because, yeah, Pain Cycle is a 66.67% DPS increase, but this was something that I could look up as well. But let's just say that since Pain Cycle triggers every 6 hits, weapons that have a 2-hit combo or a 3-hit combo where the last hit of the combo does more damage than the first 2, if you are consistently landing Pain Cycle's trigger on that stronger hit, you will get more than a 66.67% increase. So for a Katana, since its last hit is quite a bit stronger, you actually get an 84.75% increase, and that was, again, this was stuff that I figured out myself. On that chart that they'd made, you see that it's only saying 66.67%, but specifically for this was actually for katanas too, which, like I said, it was 66.67, but if you do your own research, you would find that it's 84.75% more if you do it optimally. But this is also, if I look up mace here, for instance, we have here, oh no, this was the second result. Let's go up to here. Pain Cycle adds 103.7% more DPS because the first 2 hits are only, not even half as much as what the third hit is. And like I said, this was what I had figured out myself. But if we look at 103, pretty sure I could find some instances of that there. But yeah, like Pain Cycle on Mace, if lined up right, is a 103% base DPS boost. Again, that was my information. This is not, I mean, it could be something like eventually that could be figured out by others, but this was stuff that I figured out really early on, and I shared it. Like me sharing the DPS list that I was working on and explaining things, how they worked, and why the numbers were what they were with my DPS tier list. That was not like just a little, like only like 2 people saw it, and like, no, I posted it in this group. And it's really easy though for newer members to see like others like repeating that information and then them just kind of taking credit for it and kind of narking on you when you go and share your own information. It can get a bit frustrating, and that's why I decided to share or record this. Anyway, I do have a lot of runs that I could share then. It's just that I've been working on these guides here. I have quite a bit of them done already. I can share what they look like right now for the most part. We've got Anchor, we've got Axe, Highland Axe Firebrand. I was doing my best to make these look really interesting, by the way. I still have to fix the double axe and cursed axe because I mentioned about Whirlwind's built-in shockwave, but not about cursed axe built-in exploding, because I didn't think it mattered too much. The weapon itself was just so good, but because it has a really wide swing area and it has a lot of DPS and it has exploding, it obliterates Abominable Weaver because you can take out the entire group of creepers really quickly with even just Gong by itself, but especially Gong and Power Shaker. I won't really do Power Shaker anymore because it can block the killing from Cursed Axe. But with Void Strike and Enchanting, with Gong of Weakening, and Deathcat Mushroom, you obliterate those creepers, and when they die to this, they explode and they can't be resurrected by Abominable Weaver. Like, I have a video of me using my Bee Stinger that has Gravity, Stunning, Radiance, and Exploding, and it just destroyed him because I gonged them all. I grouped up the creepers with the Bee Stinger, and they got stun-locked, and I killed them all, and they flew towards the gonged Abominable Weaver, and they all exploded and annihilated it, and since they died to exploding, they didn't revive, and then I just finished off the other creepers. But before I got that roll for a rapier, I had said a while ago that with Fighter's Bindings, like I had 3 god rolls for them originally. It was, well, this was gilded: Shockwave, Swirling, Radiance, and Chains, because you could bind enemies with the punches and pick them off with Shockwave. Then there was Crit, Committed, I think I said originally either Sharpness or Gravity, and Radiance for like just pure physical damage that multiplies off of each other and other boosts. And then there was Gravity, Stunning, Radiance, and either Swirling or Exploding. But this was before I had gotten them myself to use. I just knew that Fighter's Bindings had that 15.1 hits per second hit speed because, well, I knew they had originally it's actually 7.6 hits per second without a mushroom, which for me to figure that out, I had to be able to, I had to know that information to know what the DPS of Fighter's Bindings was. But I knew that with that 15 hits per second, it would be really good with Stunning, and then I was trying to figure out what would go well with it. Well, with Gravity, you could do well with Exploding, but Swirling adds a lot more damage. But for a Bee Stinger, Rapier, and Freezing Foil, since they have such low DPS and a long combo, Exploding is really good for them. But yeah, like, talking about, like, hits per second, DPS, stuff like that, like, it's like, I don't want to sound like I'm tooting my own horn, but you will, with a lot of this stuff, I would say you heard it here first, you know, like the charts made in January, the DPS that you get from different enchants, the god roll, quote-unquote, for a Feral Soul Crossbow, things like that, or the hits per second and DPS, and how much those hits per second affect stunning with your weapon, like the exact percentages, because I have, like I said, I have that as well. It was right here, yeah. I made this with a video. I actually had to change some values because I actually did get a little bit of a different value. I believe it was with the Tempest Knives. I can't remember which one was a little different. But like this, the exact percentage chance, because you figure Fighter's Bindings, well, the way Stunning works is on average you get like a Stunning trigger every 6.6 hits, and if you get 15 hits per second, you're getting a little over 2 Stunnings per second. So you would use that to say, oh, that's actually like over a 200% chance to stun lock, but that's not how percentages work. If you do that math wrong, you could easily come out to that, but when I was plugging in the numbers with how probability actually works, it was a 99.3% chance. Rapiers in them, they have a 97.7% chance, but since the bulk of that is in really fast hits in the beginning, and the last hit is a thrust that has a bit more time in between that and the next hit, which is the start of the combo again, enemies do have a slightly increased chance to break out of it in that moment, but overall it would still be a 97.7% chance, and the reach of the weapon would keep them away from hitting you anyway before they get stun locked again. But it's just stuff like that. I did not, I didn't copy anything. Frankly, it's the exact opposite. And like I said, I don't have a problem with that, with information sharing, even if someone accidentally, you know, gets credit for it. But when these interactions happen here, it just seems a bit audacious.